Picture a wooden table in a dimly lit room. The year is 1913. On the left side of the table sits a crisp new $20 bill. On the right side sits a 1-ounce gold double eagle coin. In 1913, these two items are identical. They are twins. They are interchangeable. You can walk into a bank, slide the paper across the counter, and they will hand you the gold. You can walk into a high-end tailor in New York City with either one of them. With the paper bill, you buy a custom-fitted Italian wool suit, a pair of leather shoes, and you still have enough change left over for a steak dinner for two at Delmonico's. With the gold coin, you buy the exact same thing. The suit, the shoes, the dinner. They are equal contenders, the heavyweights of commerce. Now, fast forward 100 years to today. The war is over. The dust has settled. Let us look at the survivors. You take that same $20 bill to the store today. What does it buy you? Maybe a pair of cheap socks. Maybe a sandwich and a coffee if you skip the tip. That custom suit? Gone. The leather shoes? Gone. The steak dinner? Not a chance. That paper bill is an old man, withered, weak, on life support. It has lost 98% of its muscle mass. Now look at the gold coin. You take that 1-ounce coin to a dealer today, and you exchange it for fiat currency. You get back roughly $2,300. You walk into a high-end tailor. You buy the custom wool suit. You buy the handcrafted leather shoes. You take your spouse to the finest steakhouse in the city. The gold coin did not change. It did not get bigger. It did not mutate. It simply stood its ground, while the paper bill disintegrated into confetti. This is not just a market fluctuation. This is a crime scene. For the last century, a silent war has been waged against your wealth. It is the longest-running con in financial history, a battle between God's money and the government's money, between the discipline of physics and the whims of bureaucrats. They told you cash is king. They told you gold is a barbarous relic. They told you inflation is necessary for growth. They lied. And if you are holding your life savings in the paper on the left side of the table, you are not just losing the fight, you are being liquidated. I want to know who is in the trenches with us today. Are you watching from the US, the UK, Germany, or somewhere else? Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. To understand how you were robbed, we have to go back to the moment the referee was bribed. The year 1913 was not just the year of the suit and the steak dinner. It was the year the Federal Reserve was created. It was the moment a third party entered the ring between you and your labor. Before this moment, money was a certificate of performance. If you had $20, it meant you had created $20 worth of value for society. It was a receipt for energy expended. It was finite. But the government had a problem. Governments always have the same problem. They want to spend more money than they can tax. War is expensive. Welfare is expensive. Bureaucracy is expensive. If they tax you too much, you riot, you vote them out, you throw tea into the harbor. So they needed a way to tax you without you knowing you were being taxed. They needed a way to create money out of thin air. They needed the Federal Reserve. But there was an obstacle: gold. Gold is the disciplinarian. Gold says no, you cannot print gold. You cannot debase gold. It is chemically impossible to counterfeit. As long as the dollar was tied to gold, the government was in a straitjacket. They could not spend what they did not have. So they began the process of decoupling. They began the process of cheating. In 1933, the government realized the referee, gold, was going to call the fight. They were printing more paper claims than they had gold in the vault. The people smelled smoke. They started rushing to the banks to trade their paper for the metal. So what did the government do? Did they stop spending? Did they balance the budget? No. They confiscated the gold. Executive Order 6102. It became illegal for a U.S. citizen to own monetary gold. Think about that. The land of the free, where it was a crime to own the very money the Constitution was built on. They forced you to turn in your gold for $20.67 an ounce. And as soon as they had it all, they revalued it to $35. Overnight, they stole nearly half the wealth of the American saver. Does that sound familiar? Changing the rules in the middle of the game to bail out a bankrupt system? Then came 1971, the final blow, the Nixon Shock. The U.S. government had printed too many paper claims to fund the Vietnam War and the Great Society programs. The French and the Europeans called the bluff. They wanted their gold. Nixon went on television and temporarily suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. That temporary measure is now 53 years old. That was the moment the dollar entered the ring without gloves. That was the moment the anchor was cut. Since 1971, the supply of U.S. dollars has gone vertical. It is a hockey stick chart of insanity. And what happened to the working class since 1971? Productivity went up, but wages stagnated. Why? Because the currency they were paid in was melting in their pockets. You work harder today than your grandfather did, yet you cannot afford the house he bought on a single income. Does that sound familiar? It is not because houses are better. A pile of lumber and bricks is still a pile of lumber and bricks. It is because the ruler you are using to measure value is shrinking. When the government prints money to fund a war in a foreign country and your grocery bill goes up by 20%, that isn't Putin's price hike or corporate greed. That is the government siphoning the purchasing power out of your bank account to pay for their bombs. Does that sound familiar? They tell you inflation is complex. They tell you it is supply chains. They tell you it is transitory. But the receipt is wilder than you think.
Because when you actually look at the mechanics of this clash, you realize that gold isn't actually fighting. Gold is just sitting there. It is the rock in the stream. The dollar is the water rushing past it, getting more turbulent, more muddy, and more dangerous. The greatest trick the Federal Reserve ever pulled was convincing the world that gold is volatile. You look at a chart of gold and you see it going up and down, zigzagging across the screen. You think, wow, that is risky. But you are looking at the chart upside down. Gold isn't fluctuating, the dollar is fluctuating. The dollar is the volatile asset. When you see gold go from 1,200 to 2,000, gold didn't change. It is the same yellow metal. It sits in a vault. It does nothing. It produces no yield. It has no marketing department. The reason the price moved is that the market realized the dollar is worth less. It is a mirror. The price of gold is simply the reflection of the aggregate incompetence of central bankers. And here is the raw data of this clash. This is the tale of the tape. Contender 1, the US dollar. Age, roughly 230 years, but in its current form, only 53. Backing, the full faith and credit of a government that is $34 trillion in debt. Supply, unlimited, can be created in nanoseconds by a committee of unelected officials. Performance has lost 98% of its purchasing power since the Federal Reserve took over. Contender 2, Gold. Age, 5,000 years as a monetary metal, older than every government on Earth. Backing, physics, geology, energy, scarcity. Supply, finite, increases by roughly 1.5% per year, requiring massive energy, labor, and machinery to extract. Performance has preserved purchasing power for millennia. A Roman centurion was paid roughly the equivalent of an ounce of gold a month. That ounce bought him a fine suit of armor, a horse, and living expenses. Today, that ounce buys a fine suit, a car lease, and living expenses. Let us look at the numbers, 5 statistics that end the debate. Number 1, the price change. In 1933, gold was $20.67. Today, it hovers around $2,300. That is an increase of over 10,000%. If you held cash, you stayed flat in nominal terms, but you died in real terms. Number 2, the M2 money supply. In 1959, the M2 money supply, the measure of cash and checking deposits, was roughly $286 billion. Today, it is over $20 trillion. That is nearly a 70 times increase. When you increase the supply of something by 70 times, the value of each individual unit must crash. It is the law of supply and demand. There is no escaping it. Number 3, the national debt. In 1913, the national debt was insignificant. Today, it is $34 trillion, and it is growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. This is mathematically unpayable. The U.S. government has 2 choices: default on the debt, which destroys the global economy, or print the money to pay the debt, which destroys the dollar. They will choose the printer. They always choose the printer. And every time they print, the price of gold in dollar terms must rise to account for the new paper. Number 4, central bank buying. This is the most damning statistic of all. While Western media tells you gold is a pet rock, central banks around the world are buying gold at the fastest pace in history. China, Russia, India, Poland, Singapore. In 2022 and 2023, they bought thousands of tons. Why? Why are the entities that print the paper money dumping their paper money to buy gold? Because they know the game is ending. They are exiting the casino with their winnings before the house burns down. They are preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer the reserve currency. Number 5, the life expectancy of fiat. A study of 775 fiat currencies throughout history shows that the average life expectancy of a paper currency is 27 years. The British pound is the oldest, but it has lost 99.5% of its value. The US dollar, in its pure fiat form since 1971, is 53 years old. It is living on borrowed time. It is a geriatric patient running a marathon. This clash is not a fair fight. It is a slaughter. The strengths of the dollar are speed and convenience. You can zip it around the world in seconds. You can buy coffee with a tap. It is a fantastic medium of exchange, but it is a horrific store of value. The strengths of gold are permanence and trustlessness. It does not rely on a server. It does not rely on electricity. It does not rely on a politician keeping a promise. If the grid goes down, if the bank fails, if the government falls, the gold in your hand is still gold. The dollar relies on the Cantillon effect to survive. This is the mechanism where those closest to the money printer, the government, the big banks, the corporations, get the new money first. They get to spend it before prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to you,
In your wages or your pension, prices have already skyrocketed. You are the sponge soaking up the inflation. You are the victim of the theft. Gold is the shield against the Cantillon effect. It cannot be printed to favor the elite. It is the great equalizer. When you hold gold, you are effectively shorting the competence of the government. You are betting that politicians will continue to spend money they do not have. You are betting that they will continue to print to cover their mistakes. Looking at history, that is the safest bet you can possibly make. The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate: maximum employment and stable prices. They have failed at both. But specifically on stable prices, they have presided over a near total destruction of the currency. Imagine a car manufacturer that sold you a vehicle that lost 98% of its functionality. You would sue them, you would demand a refund, you would put them out of business. Yet we let the Federal Reserve run the economy. We are entering the final rounds of this 100-year war, and the government is preparing its final weapon: central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. This is the ultimate evolution of fiat, programmable money, money that they can turn off if your carbon footprint is too high. Money that expires if you do not spend it fast enough. Money that creates a digital prison. Gold is the exit ramp from that prison. If you understand the history of 1913, 1933, and 1971, you understand where we are going in 2026 and beyond. The debt spiral is accelerating. The interest payments on the U.S. debt are now higher than the defense budget. They are higher than the GDP of most countries. There is no mathematical way out of this trap other than inflation. They will inflate the debt away. They will destroy the value of the currency to save the system. This brings us to the final warning. Denial is comfortable. It feels good to believe that the money in your 401k is safe. It feels good to believe that the government has a plan. It feels good to believe that things will go back to normal. But normal is gone. The 100-year cycle is concluding.
We are witnessing the death of a currency regime. These events happen once every few generations, and they wipe out the middle class who are unprepared. In Germany in 1923, the middle class became poor in a matter of months. In Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, in Lebanon, in Argentina, the story is always the same. The people who held paper lost everything. The people who held real assets, gold, land, commodities, survived. You do not have to be a victim of the Federal Reserve. You do not have to let your labor be stolen by inflation. The winner of this clash was decided the moment it began. Math wins. Physics wins. Scarcity wins. The dollar is a melting ice cube. Gold is the freezer. You have a choice to make. You can keep betting on the paper that has lost 99% of its value, hoping this time will be different, or you can align yourself with the asset that has outlived every empire, every dictator, and every central bank in human history. The bell is ringing for the final round. Protect yourself. If you want the unfiltered truth about the economy, the history of money, and how to survive the coming transition, make sure you are subscribed. We do not sell fear here. We sell history, and history is undefeated.